All right, looks like we are successfully live. Thanks everybody for joining us. We know it's 5 minutes after 1, but when have you ever been to a literary reading that started right on the hour? Yeah, never. That's what I thought. Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Lisbeth Redfield, and I'm here to welcome you to this amazing reading, which is co-presented by Jill and the PEN Translation Committee in celebration of Women in Translation Month, which, as we probably all know, is August. My name is Lisbeth, as I said, and I'm one of the 2 co-organizers of the reading series Jill. Founded in 2019, Jill is a bi-monthly New York City-based Women Plus in Translation reading series that spotlights women and or non-binary translators or translators of women and or non-binary authors, or both. We currently operate as a remote virtual reading series, posting videos made by translators around the globe on our website every Wednesday. Translators in the audience, we do accept submissions of published or unpublished work, and you can learn more about what we do and our past readers at our website, jillreadingnyc@gmail.com. So that's it from me. Now I'm going to introduce you to your moderator for this afternoon. Anna Dinwiddie is a poet and translator fascinated by intersections of landscape, belief, and words. She received a Catherine Bakeless Nason Scholarship to attend the Breadloaf Translators Conference in 2019, and her writing appears in the anthology Poets of Queens, which came out in August 2020. She's currently pursuing an MFA in creative writing and literary translation at Queens College, CUNY. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Lisbeth, and welcome everyone to this first live bilingual reading in celebration of Women in Translation Month. Special thanks to Larissa Kaiser and Lisbeth Redfield of the Jill Women Plus in Translation reading series for hosting this event. And I'd also like to thank Nancy Naomi Carlson and Sandra Smith, the co-organizers of this reading series, who will each be moderating one of the Women in Translation Month readings on August 20th and 27th. We hope you'll join us for those readings as well. Thanks as well to the PEN Translation Committee and PEN America, who have made this series possible. And thank to address gender disparity in the field of translation. Women in Translation Month aims to highlight women and non-binary writers and translators whose recognition and representation in literary publishing is essential to freedom of expression. The last few months have been devastating across the world, with disproportionate impacts on those with the least access to broad platforms from which to be widely heard. One of the opportunities that has evolved with the COVID-19 pandemic is an opening up of virtual connection. And to that end, this 3-part reading series seeks to feature translators and authors reading together from all over the world, often in languages less commonly published in English translation. Today, we are thrilled to present 5 translators joined by their authors for bilingual readings from Guatemalan Spanish and Quiche, Hebrew, Egyptian Arabic, Galician, and Senegalese French. The reading will be followed by a short Q&A session if time permits, so please submit your questions for any of the panelists in the comments section below this video, and we'll ask as many as we have time for at the end. So without further ado, let me present our first pair of readers, translator Gabriela Ramirez Chavez with author Rosa Chavez. Gabriela Ramirez Chavez is a Seattle-based Guatemalan poet, translator, and literature PhD candidate at UC Santa Cruz. Her work appears in Centro Mariconadas, a queer and trans Central American anthology, forthcoming, and The Wandering Song, Central American Writing in the United States, 2017. She attended the Kenyon Review Translators Workshop with a scholarship. Rosa Chavez is a Maya K'iche Kaqchikel poet, playwright, artist, and activist who is Guatemala Program Coordinator for the international feminist organization JASS Mesoamerica, She has published 5 books of poetry, including El corazón de la piedra, 2010, and the play AWAS, 2014. Her poetry has been widely anthologized and translated. Welcome, Gabriela and Rosa.
Thank you so much for having us, for organizing this wonderfully diverse event. This is actually the first time that Rosa and I read together, so it's a real pleasure. I just want to provide a little bit of context for some of the work that we'll be reading in English, context only in English, just due to time constraints. Rosa was born in Guatemala in 1980 at the height of a dictatorship that systematically targeted Maya communities. Her family didn't teach her their Maya languages in an effort to protect her from discrimination, so she writes almost exclusively in Spanish. Rosa and I have been collaborating for the last year and a half on a couple translations, including that of her third collection titled El corazón de la piedra, which translates to Heart of the Stone, which brings into focus Maya women's experiences and explores Maya tradition, cultural continuity, and language. This collection was published in 2010 with translations into Maya K'iche done by her colleague Manuel Rachuleo. She regularly reads both the Spanish and K'iche versions of her poems during literary performances as a way to reclaim her paternal language that she was denied growing up and assert the importance of indigenous languages as a whole. Today, we'll share with you 4 poems, 2 which she will read in Spanish, and another 2 that she'll read in both the K'iche and Spanish that come out of this bilingual collection we've been working on. And with that, I want to invite Rosa to share her amazing poetry. Y bueno, con esa breve introducción, te invito, Rosa, a empezar nuestra lectura. Tu sonido está apagado, Rosa.
Sorry. Sakariki Wanagel, Hunrutz El Kiwach, qué gusto compartir en este espacio de mujeres. Comenzaré la lectura con un poema de mi primer libro llamado Casa Solitaria. La putita es una trastornada, pulmoncitos ahogados en estiércol, es adicta al calor sedante que habita al abrir las piernas. Pequeña alcohólica que tirita, es la melancolía en sus manos, una masa moldeable, comestible, gran monstruo triste, niña consentida forrada en aluminio, comida vieja en el refrigerador, las moscas que giran y circulan, cosquillas en los genitales a la hora de la siesta fúnebre. Nadie espanta los insectos, hélices transparentes que degollan la tarde. La putita sonríe y se afeita los ojos. Nadie debe saber que le duele el culo, que le lastiman severamente los latidos. Quisiera desarmarse el cuerpo, perder y olvidar algunas partes, los dedos, un pecho, el pensamiento. Es una perra en la banqueta. Olfatea, muerde y se coge a la vida. Luego descansa con la lengua seca. La putita abre el puño y llora. Dice que le duelen los poros. Bebe un trago de alcohol a escondidas y procede a dormir su llanto. En la palma de la mano se le cruza el destino. Intenta lavarlo con jabón, refriega las palmas en la pared, pero ni las cicatrices desvían el futuro. Hoy amaneció contenta, desayunó, compró flores, se dio un baño y se sintió bonita. Camina y sabe que el día es corto. Trata de no pensar en la eterna noche.
So this poem that Rosa just read comes from her debut collection entitled Casa Solitaria, which was published in 2005. It goes like this. The little whore is deranged, little lungs drowning in manure. She is addicted to the sedating heat that resides between her thighs. Little shivering alcoholic. In her hands, melancholy is a malleable dough, edible, big, sad beast, spoiled little girl wrapped in aluminum, rotting food in the fridge, flies turning and circling, tickling her genitals as she takes her sepulchral siesta. No one shoos away the insects, transparent helixes beheading the afternoon. The little whore smiles and does her eyes. No one can know that her asshole aches. that her heartbeat deeply wounds her. She yearns to disassemble her body, to lose and forget a few parts, her fingers, a breast, a thought. She is a bitch on the sidewalk. She sniffs, bites, and fucks life, then rests with her dried up tongue. The little whore opens her fist and cries, says her pores ache. She sneaks a swig of liquor, then cries herself to sleep. Destiny crosses her palm. She tries scrubbing it off with soap, scraping her palms against the wall. Not even scars can redirect the future. Today she woke up happy, ate breakfast, bought flowers. She took a bath and felt beautiful. She walks and knows the day is short. Try not to think of the eternal night.
Por las noches ella se convertía en animala. Saltaba a los techos de las casas, caminaba escondida entre las sombras, sus cuatro patas, su carita de muchacha bonita, su cola, sus pechos redondos de lado a lado. Vestida de bulto negro se paseaba entre la milpa, comía deliciosos animales pequeños, enamoraba a las estrellas con su mirada perdida. La animala llegaba cansada a su casa, nada recordaba al día siguiente. Amanecía despeinada y con los pies lastimados, con las uñas negras y el cuerpo caliente. Una noche salió a buscar la luz de la luna. Bajó a un barranco a encontrar su destino, a aullar con los coyotes sus tristes penas. Descubrió que la vida y la muerte tenían sentido y nunca más volvió a su cama de muchacha buena.
That last poem was published in a literary magazine in 2014, and it's untitled, and it goes, "At night, she turned into a beast woman, leaping across the rooftops, walking hidden in the shadows, her 4 legs and pretty little girl face, her tail and round breasts moving side to side. A black shape wandering in the cornfields, devouring delicious little animals, wooing the stars with her vacant gaze. The beast woman gets home tired, remembering nothing the next day. She'd wake up with messy hair and wounded feet, with dirty nails and body in heat. One night she went searching for the moonlight. She went down a ravine to find her destiny and howl out her sorrows with the coyotes. She realized this life and death made sense and never again returned to her good girl bed."
Inkak'an wenutz'umal rumal ch'iwech tachik. Weka'atal k'an nutz'umal ril junch'kamikal. K'ojun la krikow rich'ajij nutz'umal awk'ux rimuj. K'ojun la k'elesan oxib nuware rech ukunab'al. Xajeri k'inwalaj chiwib ruk' rik'eb nuk'ab'wach. K'in yuj k'aj ch'iwij hacha juk'aq'aj xujut. K'wel sajej riwak ch'ewbanik uchok'on riwix p'ayjir. Intawi wari ka'atal kan tz'umal. K'inkej rinutijolal ruk' oxomal. Tajin k'inalaxik. Dejo tirada esta piel que ya no me pertenece, esta piel abandonada testiga de otra muerte. Alguien encontrará mis escamas tiesas en el corazón de las sombras. Alguien me quitará 3 colmillos para su medicina. Volveré entonces a parirme con los ojos abiertos. Volveré a cicatrizar como gusano de fuego. Volveré a estirar mi lengua para hacerle cosquillas al pasado. Ya no soy esta piel abandonada. Contraigo los músculos con dolor. Estoy naciendo.
I shed this skin, no longer mine, this abandoned skin, witnessing another death. Someone will find my stiff scales in the heart of the shadows. Someone will pull 3 of my fangs for their medicine. Then I'll give birth to myself again with eyes wide open. I'll scar again like a burning moth caterpillar. I'll stretch out my tongue again to tickle the past. I am no longer this abandoned skin. I contract my muscles in pain. I am being born.
Y para cerrar nuestra lectura. Wikiwilpaleja, junk ekapepe, kishibihta iwik, wikiwilpaleja, junkap, kikamisachtaj, riareri kaptit kamam, eopanakche kachapeshik. Si miran en la casa una mariposa negra, no se asusten. Si miran en la casa una abeja, no la maten, porque son nuestros abuelos y abuelas que vienen a visitarnos. Gracias.
And to close, we will read this final translation. If you see a black butterfly in your home, don't be frightened. If you see a bee in your home, do not kill it. They are ancestors who have come to visit us. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela and Rosa. Our next pair of readers will be translator Joanna Chen with author Tahila. Joanna Chen is a literary translator and writer. Her full-length translations include 2 books of poetry, Less Like a Dove and Frayed Light, a finalist for the Jewish National Book Award, and a book of nonfiction, My Wild Garden. She writes a column for the Los Angeles Review of Books. Tahila Hakimi is an award-winning Hebrew poet and fiction writer. She was a 2018 Fulbright Fellow at the University of Iowa. Hakimi has published a poetry collection, Will Work Tomorrow, a graphic novel, In the Water, and a collection of novellas, Company. Hakimi is a mechanical engineer by profession. Welcome, Joanna and Tahila.
Hi, it's great reading with you today, and I'm thrilled to be invited. Just for a short introduction, Joanna and me will read from Company, which is a collection of novellas, partly inspired by my work's experience as an engineer. In this book, I wanted to experiment with language and narrative, a story where everything but work is left out. And now to you, Joanna.
It's great to be here and a wonderful opportunity to share Tahila's writing. Thank you to Penn and Jill, Women in Translation Reading Series, for hosting this evening. What I wanted to do in this translation was to capture the voice and the flavor of Tahila's original Hebrew so that others can enjoy it all over the world. So, Tahila, would you like to begin?
Yes, sure. אישה בחלל עבודה, מתי אוהבו אותך? קרה שלא קמת מהכיסא עד לארוחת הצהריים. את שותה הרבה מים, אבל הגוף קיבל צורה של כיסא. אישה בחלל עבודה, החלל משתנה, העבודה משתנה, חברות קמות ונופלות. את יכולה לסגור את הדלת, אבל עדיין אפשר לשמוע את המדפסת התלת-ממדית עובדת. זה עוזר בייצור של מודלים יחידים. זה חוסך זמן. העלות נמוכה. נזכרתי.
Woman in Workspace, when will you be loved? Sometimes you don't get up from your chair until lunchtime. You drink a lot of water, but your body has assumed the shape of a chair. Woman in Workspace, the space changes, the work changes, companies rise and fall. You close the door, but the 3D printer can still be heard whirring away. It helps with the manufacturing of prototypes. It saves time. The cost is low. I remember. Once I went to a job interview. They designed and constructed 3D printers like this one. I'd forgotten how much noise they make. The interviewer looked at my resume, and after a few professional questions, he asked, "Did you ever shoot a gun?" "Yes," I told him, "but only at cardboard targets." Woman in workspace, have you ever loved?
את הרעש של המכונה התלת-ממדית את כבר לא שומעת. את מתרגלת אליו אחרי כמה חודשים. הקירות מגבס, את שומעת הכל, שומעים הנחות מהחדרים הסמוכים, הצפצופים של השער, כניסת ספקים.
You no longer hear the noise of the 3D printer. You get used to it after a few months. The walls are made of plaster. You hear everything. Sighs from nearby offices, the beep of the gate, suppliers arriving. Sometimes, alongside the rhythmic beep of the gate, the honking of a car. Someone opens the door. Woman in workspace, sometimes I think about beginning the story here. Woman in workspace, shaped like a chair, you do not get up until lunchtime. Woman in workspace, did you ever love? The space changes, the people change, the work increases or comes to a halt. Sometimes offices are remodeled, potted plants, programs are introduced to oversee inventories, processes, files. Woman in workspace, do you hear me?
המנכ"ל קפץ על השולחן והטיח דברים. אמר, אתם לא עובדים מספיק קשה. המנכ"ל קפץ על שולחן פקידת הקבלה והתייצב עליו, ארוך ולבן, השולחן. אמר, אנחנו מאבדים זמן ואתם לא עומדים בידי הקבוצה. צריך לשמור על הפוקוס.
The CEO jumped on the desk and hollered, said, "You're not working hard enough." The CEO jumped on the receptionist's desk and steadied himself, long and white, the desk. Said, "We're running out of time and you're not keeping up with company goals. More focus is needed." Emphasized, "Our success depends on you alone." Said, "You need to step up." Said, money time is right now. There'll be no injury time." We stood there. We stared at him in silence.
אמר, על גופתי. החלפנו מבטים, הרגליים מפוסקות. דיבר, חזר והזהיר. העיניים נצצו. אמר, אנחנו עוד רגע לפני מימוש החלום. אמר, זה לא הזמן למנוחה. אמר, בקבר תנוחו.
Over my dead body, he said. Exchanged glasses, legs spread apart. He kept going, cautioned us again, eyes glistening. He said, "We're a step away from realizing the dream." He said, "This isn't the time for a vacation." Said, "Save that for the grave." Repeated these sentences several times. His legs held firm, his hands moved to the rhythm of his speech, quicker and quicker. The pep talk ended, and we went our separate ways. I returned to my cubicle. On the way back, I passed by the manager's cubicle. He was in the middle of a conference call, spoke loudly into the microphone, ears covered by large headphones. "We must push the delivery time," he shouted. His face was glued to the computer screen. "We must push the delivery time." I continued in the direction of my cubicle. Noise, the noise of keyboards and conversations. The break room was empty. When I got back to my workstation and sat down at the computer, the mailbox was full.
אסור להתחיל במיילים. קראתי על זה כתבה. חוק מספר 1, אסור להתחיל במיילים.
Don't begin with emails. I read an article about it. Rule number 1, don't begin with emails. I opened the notepad and started leafing through. I got to the last page, a list of assignments, a long list of subjects. I began preparing for the meeting. I clicked on the relevant documents. A colleague in a nearby cubicle was typing away, typing hard. I managed to focus. I typed quickly, me too, fingers striking the keys. In the background, my colleague's fingers pounded the keyboard, breath heavy, me too.
בחצות, הראש שיקע בכרית ונזכרתי בדג. האכלתי אותו או לא? ירדתי מהמיטה, הוצאתי מהאקווריום, שמתי בקופסת פלסטיק עמוקה.
At midnight, my head hit the pillow and I remembered the fish. Did I feed it or not? I got out of bed, removed the fish from the aquarium, put it in a deep plastic container, went to clean the aquarium. Maybe the fish is sick. The aquarium slipped through my fingers and shattered in the sink. I left it there in the sink. Afterwards, I put some food in the plastic container and the fish swam around. It looked quite pleased to me. I feed it on Mondays and Thursdays, but sometimes it's hard to remember when Mondays and Thursdays are. I get the schedule wrong.
גם עם המחזור החודשי. הוא תמיד היה מדויק מאוד וידעתי לזהות כשהוא בא. עצבים אטומיים ללא כאבים.
My monthly period too. It was always very punctual and I could gauge when it was coming. Painless nuclear nerves. At a certain stage, I installed an app that tells me when my period is coming. I wrote down the symptoms that appear before, during, and after, and also when I last had sex, if at all, and with whom. I got the cell phone from the company. The company also pays the monthly cell phone bill. From time to time, they replace the cell phone, everyone's, usually an upgrade. At other times, if stolen or damaged, they agree to replace it. Many numbers have been lost or erased because of upgrades, or the opposite, doubled and tripled. Mostly, I pay no attention. The main problem is with the dates. The app syncs with the latest update, but sometimes it's not accurate enough. In these cases, I simply lose count.
אישה בחלל עבודה, השתעממת? על מה את חושבת עכשיו?
Woman in Workspace, are you bored? What are you thinking of now? You have 37 unread emails in your inbox. There are also assignments written on the whiteboard in your handwriting. I see you've made an effort to write legibly. Someone enters the room. He's talking to you, can you hear? Now he puts a hand on your desk, leans against it, peers at the computer screen. You discuss a document. He asks you for something, an issue for which you have sole responsibility. He asks a very simple question. The answer should already be on the tip of your tongue. Now is the time to answer because he has finished talking.
אישה בחלל עבודה, הוא הפסיק לדבר. הוא שותק כבר 5 שניות לפחות. אני יודעת. כי זה בערך הזמן שלקח לי לומר אישה בחלל עבודה.
Woman in Workspace. He has stopped talking, has been silent for at least 5 seconds. I know, because this is about the same time it took me to say woman in Workspace. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna and Tahila. Our next pair of readers will be translator Melanie Magadao with author Reem Bassiouni. Melanie Magadao is the founder of Marhaba Language Expertise, providing Arabic to English translation and other multilingual services. She holds a PhD in Middle Eastern languages and cultures from the University of Texas at Austin. Magadao has received fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the Fulbright Commission. She is also a co-host of the Goodreads MENA Lit Book Group. Reem Bassiouni was born in Alexandria, Egypt. She obtained her MPhil and PhD from Oxford University in linguistics. In addition to more than 8 books in linguistics, Bassiouni has 7 novels and has won numerous awards. Her novels have been translated into English, Greek, and Spanish. Her most recent masterpiece, Sons of the People, the Mamluk Trilogy, was published in 2018. Bassiouni was awarded the prestigious Naguib Mahfouz Award from Egypt's Supreme Council for Culture for the Best Egyptian Novel of the Year, 2019 to 2020, making her the first woman to win this prize. Welcome, Melanie and Reem.
Thank you so much. I am the translator of Mortal Designs, and Reem Bassiouni is the author. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the book, and then Reem will read a passage from the very middle of the book, about 2 pages long, just to give you a little taste of it in Arabic first, and then I'll read the translation in English. So this novel weaves a story of love amid social class and gender issues in contemporary Egyptian society. The main characters include Captain Murad, a retired captain. He wants Hazem, an architect, to build him a grand sunlit mausoleum on the banks of the Nile. In order to make this happen, he kindles an unlikely romance between Hazem and Asma, an impoverished single mother who strives for a better life for her children. As Murad's tomb rises on the riverbank, Hazem and Asma fall in love, calling into question their individual priorities and their roles in society. Reem Bassiouni tells this story with a great deal of humor and compassion. And the Arabic that she's going to read from is titled Ashya Ra'ya, which literally means wonderful things, a quote from Carter, who discovered an ancient tomb. I'll turn it over to Reem Bassiouni, the author.
Hi, everyone. And I will start with the passage that we chose together. صباحا عندما دق جرس الباب في البيت فتحت أسماء عينيها في فزع وهي تظن أنها لو ماتت يعني قامت في تكاسل لتفتح الباب وهي تسمع صوت ابنتها تهمس في حاجة يا ماما؟ قالت وهي تطمئنها نام يا سلمى. ثم ارتدت عباءتها على قميص النوم الأبيض ووضعت وشاحا على رأسها واتجهت إلى الباب. فتحته في قلق ونظرت إلى الضابط الذي يقف أمامها ومعه 4 عساكر وكل الجيران. قبل أن تنطق قال الضابط في فتور أنت أسماء محمد الشرقاوي؟ قالت وهي تنظر حولها للجيران وهم يتغامزون ويمصمصون الشفاه ومنهم من شعر بالفزع من أجلها نعم. ما إن نطقتها حتى أمسك العسكري بكتفها في عنف وقال هيا اخرجي معي هيا. لم تشعر بشيء سوى بابنها الصغير ويمسك بيدها قائلا ماما ماذا حدث؟ سمعت الكثير من الأصوات سأل من حجرتها عما حدث. قال للضابط ماذا حدث؟ أمسك العسكري بذراعها فقاومته مقاومة ضعيفة وقالت سأسير وحدي لا تمسني. وفي وسط الساحة وبينما الجيران والأولاد يتجمعون حولها كأنها لاعب مصارعة رفع العسكري يده وألقى بها على وجه أسماء بكل قوته وهو يقول يا عاهرة هيا يا بنت الحرامية. فقدت توازنها ووقعت على الأرض والصفير يصم أذنيها. صرخ ابنها واتجه إلى العسكري فأشهر العسكري مسدسه أمامه وصاحت وهي ترفع كفها لابنها وتمسك أنفها الذي بدأ ينفذ بكفها الأخرى اسكت يا طه لا تفعل شيئا لا تفعل شيئا. تقهقر طه بعض الشيء والغضب يسيطر على وجهه. وضعت ابنتها يدها على فمها في ذهول وطأطأ طه رأسه في تخاذل وأدارت أمها رأسها وهي تلعن كل الناس. وقال العسكري وهو يمسك ذراعها ويشدها من على الأرض ده أنت متوسع عليكي قوي. دفع بها العسكري إلى عربة البوليس فأغمضت عينيها وهي تحاول استيعاب ما يحدث وزاحت الدماء بكمها وهي تتمنى لو قطعت الأنف ليتوقف هذا النزيف الفضولي الذي يأتي في أوقات حرجة لا تحتمل التفاهات. كانت العربة ممتلئة برائحة الصنان والعفن ولم تزل أذنها تصفر بلا توقف. وضعت يدها على أذنها في عفوية وكأنها تحاول أن توقف هذا الصفير ولم يقابل عينيها عين العسكري الذي يحدق فيها. عندما وصلت إلى القسم أمرها العسكري بالخروج من العربة ودفع بها بقوة ووقعت على رأسها لحظات ثم أمسكت بها يد ضابط مختلف أو هذا ما بدا لها وهمس في أسف أنا آسف. نظرت إلى وجهه كان يبدو في بداية العشرينات. صاح في العسكري خلي بالك يا حمار. وقال العسكري مسرعا دي متوصي عليها يا بيه. شكرا. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is from the beginning of chapter 8, from the center of the book. At 3 in the morning, when the doorbell rang, Esma opened her eyes in horror, certain that her mother had died. Then she remembered that her mother lived with her, and that if she had died, she herself would be the first to know. She rose wearily to answer the door, her daughter asking, "Is anything wrong, Mama?" "Go to sleep, Selma," she replied reassuringly. She put her abaya cloak on over her white nightshirt, tied a scarf on her head, and headed toward the door. She opened it nervously and looked out at the police officer who stood before her, along with 4 guards and all the neighbors. Before she could speak, the officer said coolly, "Are you Esma Muhammad Sharqawi?" Looking around at the neighbors, some of whom gave her taunting, insinuating looks, and some of whom looked frightened for her, she answered yes. No sooner had she said it than a guard took hold of her roughly and said, "All right, come with me, let's go." Her youngest son, holding her hand, was asking, "Mama, what's going on?" She heard many voices, her daughter shouting, her eldest son coming out with her, her mother calling from her room, asking what was happening. "What happened?" she asked the officer. The guard gripped her arm and she shook off his hand. "I will walk by myself. Don't touch me." In the middle of the square, with all the neighbors and the young men who were out at night gathered around as if she were in a wrestling match, the guard raised his hand and slapped Esma's face with all his strength, saying, "You whore! Let's go, slut!" She lost her balance and fell to the ground. A high-pitched ringing filled her ears. Her son yelled and moved toward the guard. The guard pointed his gun at him. Esma shouted, raising a hand to Taha and holding her nose with her other hand to stop the bleeding. "Shut up, Taha, don't do anything, don't do anything." Taha stepped back, his face awash with anger. Her daughter put her hand on her mouth in fear. Taha bowed his head in defeat. Esma turned her head, cursing the bystanders. The guard, holding her arm and forcing her up off the ground, said, "You're making things very difficult for yourself." He pushed her into a police car. She closed her eyes and tried to register what had just happened. So much blood poured out that she wished she could just dispose of her nose altogether to be rid of the troublesome bleeding that came at times of duress. Her nose was unable to withstand a little pressure. The car smelled like armpits and decay, and her nose bled nonstop. She put her hand gingerly to her nose as if she could halt the onslaught. Her eyes did not meet those of the guard who stared at her. When she arrived at the station, the guard ordered her to exit the car and pushed her roughly. She fell, hit her head, and lay still for a few moments. Then a new officer's hand grasped her. "I'm sorry," he whispered in what seemed to her a regretful tone. She looked at his face. He looked like he was in his early 20s. He shouted at the guard, "Leave off, you goon!" "She's a difficult one, sir," the guard said. That's the end of the section.
Thank you, Melanie and Reem. Our next pair of verses will be translator Laura César Coelhin with author Lara do Paso. Laura César Coelhin translates from Spanish, Portuguese, Portuñol, and Galician. She co-translated Fabián Severo's Night in the North from Eulalia Books. Her translation of Hilda Hill's of Death Minimal Odes from Coim Press won the 2019 Best Translated Book Award. Her translations have appeared in Asymptote, Modern Poetry and Translation, The New Yorker, and more. César Coelhin is the author of 5 poetry collections, most recently Life, One Not Attached to Conditionals from 30 West Publishing House. She is the publisher of Velis Books. Lara do Paso has published 4 poetry collections and is the co-editor and co-author of the experimental essay volume, and I apologize if I butcher some of these titles, A Través das Marxes Entrelazando Feminismos, Ruralidades e Comuns. Her poetry collection, Ovella, was awarded the Francisco Añón Prize in 2015, and with Klaus Eoalacran, she received the Fis Vergara Vilariño Prize in 2017. Do Paso was a resident artist at the Spanish Royal Academy in Rome for the academic year 2018-2019. Welcome, Laura and Lara.
We're very grateful to be here and sharing this space with all these wonderful translators and writers. And thank you very much to the organizers. I'm gonna give a little bit of an introduction to the poems from the book, which we will be reading from. The name of the book where the poems come from is Klaus y Alacrán, Klaus and the Scorpion. And this is Lara do Paso Rival's third poetry collection. And like Ana mentioned, it won the 2017 Fis Vergara Vilariño Award, one of the most prestigious awards given in the Galician language. In 2018, it was published by Espiral Mayor. This book was written in Galician, which is the language spoken in Galicia in the northwest of Spain. Galician, together with Basque and Catalan, are also official languages in Spain. However, these three languages are relegated to a secondary or inferior status compared to Spanish. Some of the poems in this collection and my translations have been published in Asymptote and Waxwing. And a little bit about the book, Klaus and the Scorpion looks into the complexities of living in this world and the dynamics between three characters. And these dynamics are generated because of and in spite of the complexities. The book describes a world full of violence and pain, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, a world that demands learning to navigate helplessness and precariousness. Do Paso Rival's book raises the questions of who do we become and how do we contend with violence and pain? And how do we draw strength from vulnerability? Lara?
Thank you, Lau, for your words. I am really happy to be here with the amazing writers and translators. So let's start with the first poem. O mar está en calma, ainda que é inverno, ainda que hai temporal, o mar está en calma. Fixo a vista e podo velos gravados nos muros de pedra, invisibles no pasar dos dedos. Diante de min un desfile de corpos que non me interesa. Perdo volume, co pasar dos días, perdo aire, pero o mar está en calma, e só por iso respiro. Eu podo ser a seguinte, podo perdelo todo sen apostar e que iso explique o zunido nos oídos, a cópula frenética dos insectos antes de morrer, as pingueiras en riba da cama que cruzan de auga as paredes da casa. Ben Jacob, coas súas 13 tribos, apúntame cun cetro, di, por que non es feliz se eu si son feliz? Eu dígolle, marcha, non quero lembrar o teu nome. Deixo o cetro en riba do meu ventre, e con el domino as bestas que me habitan no inverno, pero o mar está en calma e as bestas acougan. O desfile de corpos continúa, pero eu pídolles que saian das salas e miralos aos ollos. A sala é unha avenida enorme, tan grande que non pode pertencer a esta cidade, a ningunha cidade coñecida. Quedo soa, naquela avenida de terra, co peito descuberto. Agardo a que veñan os cabalos, mandas de cabalos sen ferrar a golpearme no peito. Atravésanme del lado a lado, pero como estou soa, podo chorar. Os cabalos berran o meu nome e o nome dos meus pais, ameazan con romper os vidros que me cubren o corpo, pero eles saben que o mar está en calma, aínda que eu chore. Teño o útero roto en 1000 anacos, que recollo do chan e gardo sen orde. No espazo do útero meto unha folla seca, co meu nome escrito en tinta negra. Cos anacos de útero, tapo as fentas do tellado dos muros da casa, protéxome da chuva. Vou ao porto, coas marcas dos cabalos a saírme por fora da roupa, aparto os barcos coas mans, os barcos cargueiros inmensos, e choro de felicidade porque, a pesar do temporal, a pesar do inverno, o mar parece en calma, e só por iso respiro.
The sea is calm, even if it's winter. Even if there's a storm, the sea is calm. I focus my gaze and I see the engravings on the stone walls, invisible to the passing of fingers. Before me, a parade of bodies I'm not interested in. I lose volume with each passing day. I lose air, but the sea is calm. And just for that, I breathe. I can be the next one. I can lose it all without betting. And let that explain the buzzing in my ears, the frenzied copulation of the insects before dying, the leaks over the bed that cross the house's walls with water. Jacob comes with his 13 tribes, points at me with his scepter, says, Why are you not happy if I am happy? I tell him, leave. I don't want to remember your name. He leaves the scepter on my belly, and with it, I dominate the beasts that inhabit me in winter. But the sea is calm, and the beasts quiet down. The parade of bodies continues, but I ask them to leave the room without looking at them in the eyes. The room is an enormous avenue, so big that it can't belong to the city, to any well-known city. I am alone in the dirt road with my chest exposed. I wait for the horses to come, herds of unshod horses to hit my chest. They run over me, they run through me, but since I am alone, I cry. The horses shout my name and the name of my parents. They threaten to shatter the glass that covers my body, but they know the sea is calm, even if I cry. My womb is shattered into smithereens that I pick up from the floor and put away in disorder. In the space of my womb, I put a dry leaf with my name written in black ink. With the smithereens from my womb, I fill in the cracks on the roof and the walls of the house. I protect myself from the rain. I go to the port with the marks from the horses evident even under my clothes. I move aside the ship with my hand, the immense cargo ships, and I cry with joy because despite the storm, despite the winter, the sea seems calm, and just for that, I breathe.
No transo dos corpos, renuncio o transo dos corpos. A carne descoñecida e o seu valor. Renuncio ao mercado e ao ouro. A miña pel, aínda tersa. Porque estou viva, é abril, e os días sucédense sen saber a que estación corresponden. Renuncio aos días, só se podo quedar co tempo que hai despois dos corpos, despois da noite que nunca precede o día. Renuncio a todo, se podo quedar con iso, co tempo da noite que nunca precede o día.
In the intertwining of the bodies, I renounce the intertwining of the bodies, the unknown flesh and its value. I renounce the market and the gold, my skin still smooth, because I'm alive. It's April, and one day follows the next, not knowing what season each belongs to. I renounce the days only if I can keep time, the time after the bodies, after the night that never precedes the day. I renounce everything if I can keep that, the time of the night that never precedes the day.
Entón, sai a plegaria enterrada no fondo da raíz. Repito, non sei falar a túa lingua, non sei falar a túa lingua. Fora o sol, tendido o sol, o espanto. Sai a plegaria, non sei falar a túa lingua, por favor, déixame manter o silencio. Fora, tendido baixo o sol fraco, o alacrán. Desterro a raíz coa ansia coa que bebo da única fonte da cidade. No fondo, hai unha chave enorme cunha inscripción que non podo ler. Eu choro, non sei falala a túa lingua. Repito cada vez máis baixo. Fora, o sol, baixo o sol, os insectos danzan arredor do espanto. Moitas grazas.
So a prayer comes out buried at the bottom of the root. I repeat, I don't speak your language. I can't speak your language. Outside the sun, lying under the sun, the horror. The prayer comes out. I can't speak your language. Please let me keep silent. Outside, lying under the weak sun, the scorpion. I yank the roots from the earth with the same eagerness with which I drink from the only water source in the city. At the bottom, there is an enormous key with an inscription I can't read. I cry, I cannot speak it. I can't speak your tongue. I repeat, quieter and quieter. Outside, in the sun, under the sun, the insects dance around the horror. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Lara. Our next reader will be translator Aubrey D. Jones. Her author, Ken Bugu, is unfortunately not able to join us today, so Aubrey will be reading both from the original Senegalese French and from her translation. Aubrey D. Jones is Assistant assistant professor of French at Weber State University in Utah. She received her PhD in French literature from the University at Buffalo, SUNY, and has also worked in freelance translation since 2010. Aubrey is now involved in building translation study of French at Weber State, as well as undertaking the translation of works of Franco-Ontarian and Senegalese poetry and fiction. She lives in Ogden, Utah, with her husband and 3 children, and will often be found wandering in the mountains when not in her office. Ken Bugu was born in Senegal in 1947 as Mariatou Mbaye. In her native language, Wolof, her pen name means one who is not wanted. From 1986 to 1993, she worked at the International Planned Parenthood Federation in Kenya, Togo, and the Congo. Ken Bugu's autobiographical debut novel, Le Baobab Fou, was published in 1982 and is one of the most important documents in the Francophone literature of West Africa from the 1980s. Since then, Bugu has published many novels, which have been translated into several languages. Characteristic of her work is a highly literary language densely woven with the rhythms and fundamental thought structures of Wolof. Welcome, Aubrey.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I've really enjoyed listening to everyone's work in their own beautiful languages and in mine. So thank you. I'll be reading a short passage from Ken Bugu's novel, Riwan, ou Le Chemin de Sable. So this is Ken Bugu's 3rd of 10 novels, and it was published in 1999 with Présence Africaine. And as it was mentioned in the intro, Ken Bugu's first novel, Le Baobab Fou, was published in 1982, and it's the only one actually to have thus far been translated into English as The Abandoned Baobab, the story of a Senegalese woman, and that was in 1999, that translation. And so like that novel, Riwan is a semi-autobiographical work. When I interviewed her in 2018, she said that she's interested in having more of her fiction translated into English. This one has been translated into German so far. So in English, Riwan ou Le Chemin de Sable is Riwan or the Sandy Path. So Riwan is the name. I've chosen a short passage from the novel that I thought would be a lovely fit for Women in Translation Month. And it's also one of the passages that really drew me to Ken Bugu's work before I ever started down the path of translating it or even realized I would be translating it. So it's not long, it's only a couple pages. I know I'm the last one and I can probably finish this up pretty quickly. I'm going to try to read slowly and clearly, because I have a tiny voice, it's usually hard to hear. And so I'll read a little bit of the French, then English, French, then English, and French, then English. And just one note on the language. So Ken Bugu's first language is Wolof, but she writes largely in standard French. But there's a heavy influence of Wolof in all of it, and many terms that are specific to West African Muslim culture. So one word you'll hear right away is the word serigne, and I don't translate that in the English. It's a name and a title in Muslim Senegal, and it's used to designate a sort of leader, spiritual and worldly leader. It's akin to the word marabout, if you're familiar. So I will start. Le serigne ronfla doucement. Je levai la tête vers lui. Il dormait. Qu'allais-je faire maintenant seul avec ma samba et le serigne assoupi? L'homme gardien revint, vit que le serigne avait fermé les yeux, sembla renoncer à ce qu'il voulait faire ou dire et s'assit près de la porte. Nous étions là tous les trois, éveillés, devant le serigne qui continuait à ronfler avec douceur. Combien de temps cela dura-t-il? So I'll just translate that bit first. The serigne snored softly. I lifted my gaze toward him. He was sleeping. What would I do now, alone with ma samba and the dozing serigne? The attendant returned and saw that the serigne had closed his eyes. He seemed to give up on whatever he had intended on doing or saying and sat down near the door. There we were, the 3 of us, awake, seated before the softly snoring serigne. How long would it go on like this? À un moment, je pris la décision soudaine de franchir la porte au rideau en voile et me trouver dans une véranda qui donnait sur une cour propre, trop propre. Une feuille que j'apercevais sur le feuillage touffu d'un hymne n'osait pas tomber. C'était une cour entourée d'une clôture en tôle avec 2 portes. Celle de gauche devait mener à des toilettes, car une légère odeur d'urine s'en dégageait. Celle de droite était fermée par un crochet. Cette porte menait certainement à une cour animée, car des éclats de voix s'en échappaient. At some point, I made an impulsive decision to pass through the curtained doorway and found myself on a veranda that opened onto a tidy courtyard. Too tidy. A leaf that I noticed clinging to the lush foliage of a neem tree dared not fall. The courtyard was surrounded by a sheet metal fence with 2 entrances. The one on the left must have led to the latrines, as I detected a light odor of urine emanating from it. The one on the right was sealed by a latched gate. Given the shouts escaping from within, I surmised that this passage led to a lively courtyard. Je me hasardai vers cette porte et tirai le crochet doucement, mais la porte s'ouvrit avec brutalité, en m'entraînant légèrement avec elle. Et ce fut comme si 1000 faces s'étaient tournées en même temps vers moi. Des faces, des visages, des faces de femmes, des visages de femmes. Des femmes assises, des femmes debout, des femmes qui allaient, des femmes qui venaient, des femmes qui étaient couchées. Des femmes partout, rien que des femmes. Je m'avançai vers elles. Devais-je serrer la main à chacune d'elles? Les mains tendues vers les miennes étaient de toutes couleurs, de toutes les tailles, de toutes les odeurs vraisemblablement. Les mains de femmes. Que de messages, que de signes, que de symboles. Je serrai des mains et des mains. Des mains grosses, des mains rugueuses, des mains menues, des mains sèches, des mains douces, des mains aux pommes mouchetées, des mains aux pommes rouges, des mains aux pommes noires. Des mains de femmes. Les mains tendues étaient accompagnées de sourires, de questions muettes, de regards chargés, des mains, des masques, des faces, des visages. Je continuais à serrer des mains quand l'homme gardien surgit discrètement et m'invita à le suivre. Le signe me réclamait. Je serrai la dernière main et suivis l'homme gardien à regret. J'avais seulement serré des mains. Je n'avais échangé aucun mot, aucune parole avec aucune d'entre elles. The courtyard was surrounded by a sheet metal fence. Sorry, I have to start at this part. Okay, I ventured toward this gate and began to gently lift the latch. But the gate swung brutally open, pulling me along with it, and suddenly I felt as though 1,000 faces turned toward me at once. Faces, a sea of faces, women's faces. Women seated, women standing, women coming, women going, women sleeping. Women everywhere, nothing but women. I started toward them. Should I shake the hand of each one? The hands reaching out to mine seemed to be of all colors, all sizes, all fragrances. The hands of women. What messages, what signs, what symbols. I shook hands, hands, and hands. Hands that were large and rough or dainty and soft. Hands that were dry and mottled. Hands with reddened palms and blackened palms. The outstretched hands were accompanied by smiles, silent questions, telling looks. Hands, masks, faces, gazes. I was still shaking hands when the attendant discreetly appeared and invited me to follow him. The Sereno was calling for me. I shook the last hand and followed him reluctantly. I had only shaken hands. I had exchanged not a single word with any of the women. The attendant closed the gate behind us. Thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey. And thank you to all of our readers. It was really an honor to hear you all read. It was really beautiful. And it looks like we have some time for questions, which is great. So let's see, we can all, let's see, we have some questions from the audience. I'd just like to start out by asking the translators present about how collaborative translation process is. do you work closely with the authors who you've been reading from, or are there other people who you often rely on or collaborate with during your translations?
I like to, first of all, meet with the author I'm working with and ask the author to read to me reading from the book, so that I can tune into the voice and the tone and the rest of it. And I take this afterwards and work on like that. And I like to meet the author, basically first draft, to go over it and iron out problem, maybe to understand properly.
So in my case, obviously that each translation is different because it depends on the dynamic created with the author. But with Lara, it's been amazing, and I like to. I know that she knows English, so I like to sort of like a narration of what's going on in the process of translation. I've chosen this word because of this. I've changed this because of that. I often ask questions. Did you mean this or did you mean that? Do you think I'm on the right track? You know, this back and forth, I think, is one of the best parts about translating.
In the case of this book, I wrote it out by hand. That was the first draft. And then Rein Basuni and also the editors at AUC Press gave suggestions or asked questions, and we made changes in discussion together. Rein Basuni is generally very easy to work with. We work well together, and that always helps.
Hello?
I can offer an answer. I will repeat the question in Spanish for so that my author can understand. La pregunta fue ¿qué tanta colaboración hay en este proceso de traducción? Y pues, I'll give a quick response in Spanish. Y bueno, para mí sería como que involucra más colaboración, especialmente para este libro que estamos trabajando, Rosa, porque pues hay ciertas cosas como conceptos que quiero estar súper clara en que estoy representando en inglés, o ciertas preguntas que han surgido, como por ejemplo la especie del gusano de fuego, para poder identificar las plantas y cosas así que tal vez no estoy súper segura del nombre en inglés. Y pues así estamos en ese proceso de que te mando preguntas y me respondes, así para que yo tenga un mejor entendimiento, para así poder asegurarme de que lo estoy haciendo de una manera así respetando y representando la cosmovisión así de una manera adecuada. So my answer to that is, with this book specifically, I think it involves a lot of collaboration because it has a lot of Mayan concepts, that certain ones that I might not be familiar with. And so I rely on the author to be able to make sure that I'm like fully capturing that understanding that she's writing her text through, and approximating it as much as possible in the English. There's also been a lot of questions in terms of like plant names, and even in one of the poems that I read today, the burning moth caterpillar, you know, just being able to talk to her, and because there's so many species that have the same common name throughout Latin America, so just being sure that I'm identifying the correct one, for example.
I have a similar experience to what Gabriela was saying. So I prefer translation to be collaborative, but it doesn't always work that way. But in this particular case, this translation for Rion started as a conversation, and it's continued really to be a conversation, which I think is ideal for me, at least in the process of doing this. But I had similar experiences where, you know, there are plants and certain articles of clothing and things that are particular to Senegal that me as a very visual person too, I needed to like see these things and know that I was seeing the right thing in my mind. And so I'll often search for images and ask for her, is this the one you meant? Is this the type of dress that you meant? And we have long conversations about that because she's also very detail, I think, sensorial and detail oriented like that. And one in particular was in this passage with the neem tree. I had never seen a neem tree, so I had to find images, and I even drew one and sent it to her and was like, what do you think? So yeah, I have similar experiences with that. Like I need to talk to Maya too to figure out if I'm on the right track and what.
Great. And Joanna, I know, I think we had some trouble hearing you when you answered the question. If you could just repeat what you said before you do, I just want to remind anyone watching that you can submit questions in Facebook comments below this video. So feel free to send in. We have time for a couple more. But yes, please go ahead, Joanna.
What I tried to say before was that Tehila and I met before I began the translation at my request. We sat in a cafe and I asked her, do you mind reading a section to me? And so she read me a section of the book, and I listened very carefully to the voice and the tone, and I take that with me in my head when I go back and begin translating. And the idea being that I really do try to keep the flavor of the original language in the translation. And then I like to work on my own. And at the end of my first draft, I then sat with Tehila and we went through the whole text, and perhaps there were things that weren't clear to me or clear to her, and then we go over it together. So I enjoy very much the collaboration and the dialogue between us. And I think that the act of translation is one in which you really get to know the other side.
Great. And if any of the authors who haven't spoken want to chime in with anything about how they experience the translation process, we'd love to hear that as well.
Can I speak about it? This is Reem Bassiouni.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think in my case, it was extremely, as Melanie is saying, it was a very good process. I personally think that there should be some kind of a chemistry between the translator and the author. It makes a lot of sense if they act as our colleague was Nick, because experience she has with Arabic, she was really the best person for doing this translation. And as you know, in Arabic, we have a situation that is very tricky because we have two languages or two varieties, and sometimes authors mix them together. And that could be very tricky for a translator. But she had the ability to, decipher this and write in a style that is very reflective of the novel. So I think, in a way, we were very lucky to be working together.
I can also say that for me, Joanna wasn't the first translator that I worked with, and because I'm also a poet, and the music and the rhythm is very important for me, I was so thrilled to get to know Joanna and to see the way she really took the text and gave it an amazing English version, maybe even better than the Hebrew one. This is what I felt first after I read the full translation. And what was amazing about it, I guess all of you writers feel it about your text. After a certain point that you reread your text while working on it, you can feel the sound and the rhythm, and Joanna managed to transit it to English, which is very different from Hebrew, both grammar-wise and also in English. Always the sentences are much longer, but still Joanna was able to keep the original short sentences and with a very strong rhythm. And I'm very lucky to work with Joanna, and hoping that this translation will be published soon, and to reach a lot of people in English also, not only in Hebrew.
Great, thank you so much. Oh, Lara, did you want to?
Yeah, I would like to say that I feel also quite lucky to be being translated by Lau, because I had heard my poems in Italian and Spanish before, but in English it's quite different because English is not a Latin language, so rhythm and words change a lot. So for me, it's quite amazing to be part of the translation process, explaining the meaning of some very familiar words to me, and why rhythm is like that or like this. And yeah, I feel really lucky, and I like how it sounds. So yeah.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we won't get to ask any more questions this time. But I would like to thank our panelists again for sharing their work with us. And thanks again to the Penn Translation Committee, to my co-organizers, Nancy Naomi Carlson and Sandra Smith, and to the Jill Women Plus in Translation reading series for hosting this. Our next live bilingual reading will take place 1 week from today on August 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on Jill's Facebook page. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you.